Welcome back to Wojo's Greenhouse and Garden Center here in Ortonville. I'm George, and we're ready for another episode of the Green Team. The weather is changing, and I think, as you can see behind me, we've got pumpkins. Halloween will be here and gone, and then we'll be moving into Christmas, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the program. First topic for today, using a article that Nancy Zerleg put in the News Free Press last week, talks about what you need to know about watering trees. We've talked about watering on a regular basis here. She speaks of the need, because of this summer being as dry as it was, to provide adequate water to even your established trees in the landscape. It's a matter of determining what your soil conditions are, whether you're well drained or whether you're clay. Learn your soil and then find out what the water content is. If your soil is dry, which we suspect that it will be, you need to do a deep watering. And she proposes going out with either something like a gator bag or a hose and just let it trickle near the root line of the tree to help establish that. A tree needs 1.5 inches of rain a week to keep itself viable. And there were many weeks this summer when we didn't get that, so consequently we need to provide that extra adequate water. For the established trees and shrubs, and especially the evergreens, the broadleaf evergreens that want to keep their foliage, it's important that we give them the hydration necessary to survive satisfactorily in the winter time. Another topic that we've talked about, and this I picked up from a website, fall is for planting. Fall is a perfect time for planting while the ground is still warm and hopefully moist with more rain. As we've mentioned before, with Willoway Nurseries having the tag on all of their plants they send out in the fall, that fall is this fantastic time. The ground temperature is above 40 degrees, and it gives us adequate time to get the plants in the ground and get the new roots starting to grow. And one thing that we want to share with our guests here at the Ortonville location, the tree and shrub selection of plants will remain available into November. Normally we transition the nursery, start putting things away after Halloween, but we're going to keep the plants out a little bit longer for the gardening needs of the people in the area. Talking about rain, we thought that we got a lot of rain, but this was on the National Weather website. This is a map of the state of Michigan. We find over on the western side of the state in the last 2 days they had between 3 and 6 inches of rain. Here in the Ortonville area, from this chart, we had about 6/7 of an inch of rain, so 0.67. So it's much less than what they had on the west side. While we thought it was raining a lot, the actual total was quite a bit less. So watering again is critical for our plants. Now is the time, we've talked about it, that the deer are beginning to establish their areas for their rut. The reproduction cycle, the bucks are rubbing the trees with their antlers and with their foreheads to put down the scent that will help to determine their territory. It's important that you protect your trees. We've talked about the trunk guards, and we've also talked about the plant product, the deer and rabbit repellent, to help keep the bucks away from your plants. They can very easily destroy a tree or shrub in a matter of minutes, so it's important that you do take that ounce of prevention. I got a call this week asking how much I can prune my hydrangeas. A person had a limelight hydrangea. Those limelight hydrangeas can get 6 to 8 feet tall, and his was at least 6 by 6. It was good size. And it was blocking a window. And he said, how far can I cut it back? And we find with the type of hydrangea that the the limelight are, the paniculatas or the PG hydrangeas, they're quite forgiving as far as our pruning. You could prune it back a third to a half and it would re-branch out next spring quite nicely. So I told him to go ahead, and with that he could do a fairly heavy pruning on the PGs or the paniculatas. The other types of hydrangea we're a little bit more reluctant about. The Annabelles, within that grouping, the Annabelle and the Incredible that get 3 to 4 feet tall. We encourage you to take the flowers off after a frost, but we encourage you to do minimal pruning. You want to see where the winter dieback is and prune down to that in the spring. The big leaf varieties, the Endless Summer, the Bloomstruck, and any of the older varieties you may have had, the Nico Blue, those varieties, the buds for flowers next year are on the stems. And if you snip those stems, you're taking the flower buds and throwing them away. So with that, we encourage you, after the flowers turn brown, snip them. You can clean up the plant that way, but do minimal pruning, light shaping, and then wait to see where the winter dieback is next spring and do that major pruning at that time. The same way with the oak leaf hydrangeas and the serrated, the mountain type. Minimal pruning. Where with the PG type, you can take the pruners to that and do quite well. I mentioned it last week, or the last session, and it came up again today. A person came in with a leaf off a pear tree, and that pear tree had a distinctive red blotch on it. We showed this the last time. On the surface of the top of the leaf, there's a red blotch, and on the underside, there appears to be a fungus growing. This is a disease that's impacting pear trees. It's called pear trellis rust. It's been in Michigan 2009, 2011, so only for the last, let's say, 6 to 7 years. It was on the West Coast before that, but for us, it's relatively new, and we're seeing it here in our area for what would be the first time. We had our state inspectors come in and spotted on a couple of our trees that came in from one of our growers. Didn't happen here, but it came in from the outside, and it showed the sign of the pear trellis rust. This is a fungus that goes between two hosts. The host of the pear tree for the summertime, in the wintertime it's on a juniper, the upright junipers. And with the best control is to know what you have in your landscape. The fellow this morning has a pear and no juniper, so he's in pretty good shape. He'll use a fungicide next spring to minimize it, but with that, he should be in better shape. So the pear trellis rust we're going to be talking more about as we learn more about it. We'll take a break and come back for the next segment. Thank you.
I used to think news is news. It's all the same, but it's not. There's a big difference between local broadcast news and cable news. See, local stations are part of my community, connecting me to local news, weather, and sports on every device. It makes sense. Get the news from the people I trust who actually live here. No agenda, no bias like on cable shout shows or social media, just facts. For news I can trust, I stay local. Support your local stations. Text TV to 52886 today.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the Green Team. I have been asked to present to the Clarkston Backyard Bird Watchers, and I'm going to share with us now some of the information that I have researched regarding the types of plants that we need, both plants, trees, and shrubs that you need to help fortify and sustain a very nice bird population in your landscape. I'm going to start first of all with a sign that I purchased for my own yard. As I began planting and more plants, it finally dawned on me that I had what might be described as a certified wildlife habitat. This property provides the 4 basic habitat elements needed for wildlife to thrive: food, water, cover, and a place to raise young. And that's ultimately what we're looking for when we're talking about the birds that we enjoy in our landscape. At an earlier meeting of the bird watchers, a young lady from the Michigan Audubon Society, Rochelle Rourke, spoke of the elements for a bird-friendly yard. It included the dead trees and shrubs, what are described as snags, vines that provide a benefit, shrubs that provide, again, cover and also nectar and berries and fruit, wildflowers that the birds use and insects use, grasses, nectar plants, water, and I mentioned here moving water. This is something that helps to attract the birds and helps to keep the water fresh, ground cover, and lastly, the canopy trees that provide the area for nesting and also fruit and nuts. So these would be the elements of a bird-friendly landscape as proposed by the Michigan Audubon. This past winter, I had the opportunity to hear a presentation regarding this book called Bringing Nature Home by Douglas Talmy. And he talks about the biodiversity needed within a landscape to help sustain all wildlife, and especially the birds that we enjoy in our yards. What he talks about are basically the native plants. The plants that have been around here for a long time, and the one that he mentions is the oak tree. The oak tree being significant because as far as the butterflies, moths, caterpillars generated within an oak tree, we have as many as 534 different species of caterpillars, moths, and butterflies that act as a food source for the birds. So with that, an oak tree is an excellent source of that food, where a tree, let's say like the ginkgo that we brought in from China, has maybe 3 or 4. So what we want to look for are the more established trees, the ones that have been around, what are described as the natives, the oaks, the black cherries, the willows, the birches, poplars, crab apples, all provide a nice environment for these moths, caterpillars to grow and consequently be food for the birds. With that, there is a group in Clarkston called called the Wild Ones. And this is an organization that promotes native plants. And the literature that comes out from this proposes the idea of using native plants. Why wild ones? Why the native plants? Because it helps to create that biodiversity. It's the plants that have been around here a long time, and it provides more benefit to the other living organisms. The tree that, again, Talmy talked about was the oak. And this is a representation of an oak tree and the hundreds of different species of organisms that find their home in the oak tree. And that's what is an example of this biodiversity and how by selecting certain trees you can help to create that environment. He also mentions that because of the changing culture and by having lawns, subdivisions, we have minimized the biodiversity for our birds, and the bird populations are down some 40% from what they were 20 years ago. So some groups, some communities are making a specific effort to plant the plants that the insects and other organisms grow on to benefit the birds. He even talks of a town in Florida where chickadees had an empty nest, and it's because there were no caterpillars to have them feed upon. In the springtime, the baby birds can't eat the seeds. We think that we're doing a great job by feeding the birds with our sunflower seeds and other seeds like that, but it's the caterpillars that the babies survive on. So that's why that biodiversity is so important. We talked about the oaks that provide that biodiversity benefit. Other canopy trees that provide shelter would be the cedar, the arborvitae, the spruce, the pine, and the birch. Providing nuts and seeds for birds, we have the white oak, the northern red oak, the red maple, the sugar maple, and the white pine. Providing fruit for the birds in the canopy trees, we have the blackberry, the mulberry, the mountain ash, the hawthorn, and the crabapple. Shrubs, for shelter, we find the junipers. For fruit, various plants shrubs that will provide fruit would be the serviceberry, the chokeberry, raspberry, blackberry, blueberry, dogwood shrubs, sumac, viburnum, winterberry holly, rose hips, and also junipers. The last topic that I want to talk about is how you care for your garden. And it relates to something that the Natural Habitat Organization, which is a consortium between the Natural Conservancy and the Cornell Ornithology Department. They talk about the Habitat Network and the official lazy gardener. And what they propose is a messy garden. A lot of folks are real enthusiastic about cleaning up the yard, getting things cleaned up ready for spring. And the lazy gardener's attitude is to wait till springtime. Don't clean up in the fall. Leave the leaves on the property. Allow the gorgeous dried flower heads to stay standing in your garden so that birds can enjoy them. Let the grass grow tall and seed. Build a brush pile with fallen branches instead of removing them. Forget the chemicals. Minimize the chemicals in the yard. Leave the snags or the dead trees on your property. Delay the garden cleanup until spring. So it's important that you think ahead so that you're not disrupting that biodiversity and that ecosystem that helps the birds through the winter time. We find, for example, spiders, reptiles, amphibians, rodents. 96% of all birds depend upon insects for food. So that being said, it's important. There was another handout I saw, Let It Be. And it's to talk about let nature do what it does best. Fall, mess, nurtures spring life. So with that, we'll pause and come back for the last segment. Welcome back for the final segment of the Green Team, and the topic we're going to talk about again is revisiting one we've talked about in other shows, and that's buy your firewood and burn it where you buy it. Don't move firewood. We think of the disaster that happened here in the state of Michigan back in the early 2002 when the emerald ash borer came in on shipping pallets from China. We run the risk, we've talked about the Asian longhorn beetle that is now down in Ohio, and we're hoping that it stays there and that they're able to quarantine the area and control it. If that Asian longhorn beetle gets into Michigan, we're going to find the majority of our timber in the state will be impacted and affected. So we as conscientious citizens can follow this simple practice of not moving firewood. Burn it where you buy it, and even if you buy it, let's say you go up north and you buy some firewood, use it up there. Don't bring it back down to your home down here in the southern part of the state. Keep the wood where you buy it and burn it in that location. We don't want to spread the insects by careless moving of wood product. As we prepare for winter in the garden, we talk about the garden cleanup, and I just talked about in the last segment about holding off and doing that basically in the spring. But if you have disease plants, you want to make sure that you destroy those and burn them or throw them out in the rubbish. Other plants can be put in the compost pile. As far as the berry patch, the mid-fall or the early or mid-fall berries prune the summer-bearing raspberries, leaving just the strongest canes. The fall-bearing raspberries can be cut back heavily because new canes will grow in the spring. And now is the time to cover your strawberries and mulch them in for the winter time. We've talked about continually watering your perennials and shrubs as being important, and also the idea about taking your containers and either tipping them on their side or bringing them inside so that the water doesn't get inside in the wintertime, freeze and expand and crack your beautiful containers. The broadleaf evergreens. I may have mentioned this before, but I want to mention it again. Such things as the rhododendron, the azaleas, the holly, the boxwood, the euonymus. These plants keep their leaves throughout the year, and it's important that we help them through this process. Ideally, they're planted on the east side of the house so that they get morning sun, afternoon shade. The house blocks the west wind, and it's a happy environment for them. If they're in a spot where there is some wind or more sunlight, we recommend using burlap as a deterrent to help protect the plant, providing a screen around the plant to shelter it from the wind and sun. And another product that we've mentioned before is wilt-proof or wilt stop. This is a clear sealant that you spray on the foliage. It seals the moisture inside, and it helps to keep the plant happier as far as keeping the moisture inside. I want to mention this also as we approach the holiday season. The greens that you may be putting up in the house, the wreaths, the garland, can be sprayed with this product, and it helps them to last longer. They don't dry out as fast because the same principle works, that the clear sealant will seal the moisture in those evergreen products so that they do last longer. So we keep that in mind also as we think about the preparing for the broadleaf evergreens. Some folks may have seen this critter. Box elder bugs are moving now, trying to move into homes. So it's important that you keep an eye out for them, that you seal the entryways in your home so that the box elder bugs don't get inside. They can be a tremendous nuisance if they do get inside, so be on the lookout for the box elder bugs. It's important that you keep them out of your house. We've talked about oak wilt, and now we're approaching that safe time to do pruning. I have some lower branches on an oak tree at my house. I'm going to be calling a tree person in the next few weeks so that they'll come out and do that pruning and cutting. And now is that time to do the pruning. cold enough so that the insects that carry the oak wilt virus or fungus will not be an issue for you. So the oak wilt we're now in that safe period. We talk about the safest period being down here between November 1st and March 14th. We're now in that area, and it would be the idea to go for it. The spruce decline in the Midwest is still an issue for us. And folks that have come in to purchase the evergreen trees find that what we're offering are predominantly the versions of white spruce or the Norway spruce or the Serbian spruce. We carry a baby blue eyes Colorado spruce that is more disease resistant to these fungal issues. The Colorado blue spruce, imported from the West Coast, the Colorado area, is not as hardy in our area and is subject to the fungal issues that are taking these trees down. So the trees that we sell here at Wojo's are more resistant, less likely to get the fungal issues that are impacting the Colorado spruce. So that's good news on that behalf, that the trees that we have here would be favorable to plant. This week, we received our first shipment of greens for greens production. We will start the porch pots, we'll start the memorial blankets, wreaths and garland production this weekend, and it won't be long before it'll be up in our retail area. We're also noticing an interesting thing, and I'm going to take Russell into that area for the last segment we're going to do, is looking at the color change on the poinsettia. As our days are getting shorter, that helps to stimulate the colors coming out on the beautiful poinsettias. A few weeks ago, they were green in color. Now we're finding them turning their color to the beautiful reds, and with that, we'll do that clip shortly. The fall class schedule for adults and also the kids club are available online. We encourage you to check that out and sign up for those classes. They're very popular and they sign up fast. So let's pause now, and then we will go in and finish up with some pictures of our poinsettias. Thanks, Russell, for moving inside the greenhouse. And as we can see here, 2-3 weeks ago, the leaves were all this green color. And now we see the change that takes place because of the reduced sunlight. With the fall coming, the shorter amounts of daylight, we have this vivid color change coming into play. This is one variety. This is a different variety over here that has more of a true red and not the burgundy. And again, we see the change from the green to those reds. So within a month, these will be up in retail. So we're going to see a lot of color change over the next few days. It's exciting to watch. See you next time.
Hidden gems lie all around the Leonard area. You may drive past them and not realize the beauty they hold. This is the Leonard Nature Park, located just outside of downtown. Trails surround the area, and there are plenty of places to stop and relax with family or friends. This is just a small part of Leonard, Michigan, seen only on OC TV.